Ah. So, like we had a discussion of what up to that called as when Sadao came in the third day after the operation, he found the young man was sitting up, his face bloodless with the effort. Uh, and Sadao immediately said to him that, why are you sitting? Lie down. Do you want to die? So he forced the man down gently and strongly and examined the wound. Right. So you may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing. Means Sadao scolded to the American. So what are you going to do with me? When the boy means slowly spoken, he looked just now barely 17. Are you going to hand me over? So that's what the American fear, right? And that's what he pointed to Sadao also. And then after we realized that what Sadao did not answer to his question, he finished the examination, and what kind of a questions answer Sadao did not give. So that the American asked him that whether they were going to hand over the man to the police or not. So and Sadao did not feel the importance of giving the questions answer. So he finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. So we understand that the silk quilt is called as a means a kind of a blanket, you could say, over the man. And then after stated, I do not know myself what I shall do with you. So who said? Sadao said. And it seems like there is a kind of a means kind of emotion present in Dr. Sadao, that he was a doctor as well as he was patriotic, right? A love for his country. So, but at the same time, he found out that the man was barely a 17, man was talking like a 17-year man's boy. So he pointed, I do not know myself what shall I do with you. He said, I ought, of course, to give you to the police. Means it is needed for me to hand over you to the police. You are a prisoner of war. So, no, do not tell me anything. Right. He put up his hand as he saw the young man was about to speak. Right. He put up his hand as he saw the young man was about to speak. Do not even tell me your name unless I ask it. So obviously, means why? Now, because means if the man was making him escape, so the police will torture them, torture the family. And if he knows the name of that person, so he with the pressure he could speak the name to the police. So that's why he means Sadao made the man not to speak his name also. So they looked at each other. So who? The American as well as the means Dr. Sadao. They looked at each other for a moment, and then the young man, the American, closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Okay, he whispered, means he murmured or slowly said, his mouth a bitter line. His mouth a bitter line. So outside the door, Hannah was waiting for Sadao. He saw at once that she was in trouble. He saw at once that she was in trouble. Now, what do you find out here? When Sadao and the American exchanged a look to each other, and then the boy closed his eyes and turned his face towards the wall. So, and in the low voice means he felt bitter, right? By Sadao's word. Bitter means called as a not feeling, means not a good feeling, right? Outside the door, Hannah was also waiting for Sadao. He saw that means she was in some sort of trouble. Who? Sadao saw that means his wife was in some sort of trouble. Sadao, Yumi tells me Yumi, Sadao, Yumi tells me the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here anymore. So who is saying to whom? Means Hannah is saying to Sadao. So she tells me they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our own country first. They think we like Americans. So now it comes to a kind of a result that they were the doctors, they wanted to save the patient, but the people who work as the servants of their house, so they considered it in a wrong way, and they believed that means Dr. Sadao as well as Dr. Hannah, so they were the means they didn't have the love for their country, so they were also Americans, right? So Yumi said that, sorry, who? Sadaf said harshly or in a very rough manner, "It is not true. Americans are our enemies, but I have been trained not to allow a man die if I can help it." Now, obviously, he is a doctor, right? It is his profession. Second is called as a, means he was uh, means a citizen of his country. So in that case, means he was reacting in a rough manner to whom Hannah, and said that, means that he understood that Americans were the enemies of the country, but at the same time he was a doctor. How could he allow a man to die? So the servants cannot understand that, means Hannah said anxiously, with a desirable manner, or not desirable, you can say that in a kind of a fear, anxiety. So he agreed. No, means he agreed, means Sadao also understood that, right? So neither seemed able to say more, right? Neither means both of them, Sadao and Hannah, did not say any more. Means further, and somehow the household dragged on, right? Um, the servants grew more watchful. Uh, this courtesy was as careful as ever, but their eyes were cold upon the pair to whom they were hired, right? So you would say that what both of them had nothing more to say, and the course of the house, right, continued, but the servants were, means vigilant. Vigilant means what? Now they watched at the servants, right? They were polite but unfriendly towards their masters. So it seems like what there is a detachment. There is a detachment found between the servants and the masters, right? So the masters like Dr. Sadao and Hannah, and the servants like Yumi and the old man. So there is a kind of a detachment found between them. So it is clear what our master ought to do. So they believed that the old gardener, means thought that it is clear what our master ought to do, means what our master to do, means what? Now it's a kind of a thought coming to the old gardener mind, right? The old gardener who had worked with flowers all his life, right? So, and specialized in moss, right? He had been employed by Sadao's father, right? So the gardener had made one of the, you can say that, best moss gardens in Japan for Sadao's father, right? So on the basis of that, he was saying that the master, means, is selfish, and he wanted us to do something. So at the same time, means he had made one of the finest moss gardens in Japan, sweeping the bright green carpet constantly so that not a leaf or a pine needle, right, marred the velvet of its surface. My old master's son knows very well what he ought to do, right? He now said, pinching a bud from a bush as he spoke. When the man was so near death, why did he not let him bleed? Right. Now, this could be called as a kind of a difference in thought. Like when you start reading the text, you would find out that the Yumi and the old man would be called as a what? Would be called as a kind of a negative role, because they did not support Hana, and they did not support Dr. Sadaus, and they also made a kind of a thought, like means they did not want to help the whom? help that person, American. So, but at the same time, when you look at the old gardener, right, who said that it was obvious, means what their master should have done, right? Because he was means after reading that, you find out a kind of a negative thought about the servants, right? But at the same time, this particular part is stating about something different, right? The old gardener had walked with the flowers all his life, and it was his father who hired him, right? And the gardener also did a very means clean to that place. He had formed the best moss gardens, right, in Japan for Sadao's father. He would sweep means the bright green colored carpet of the moss, so that the you could find out the sharp leaves of pine tree, so pine tree leaves, so that could not spoil the soft velvety surface, right? So he plucked a flower also, he plucked a flower bud from the bush, yeah, as he said that his master's son. So Sada know very well what he was supposed to do, right? So who said? The means old gardener said. So even the old gardener added that what now with the man was almost dead, right? He should have left him to bleed to death. So means why did he attend the man, right? So that young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life. So he was a doctor, and means he could save anyone's life. So in that case, the cook said contemptuously, she split a fowl. That young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life. Uh, the cook said contemptuously. Contemptuously means a kind of a disrespectfully, right? She split a fowl's neck. She split a fowl's neck skillfully and held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into the roots of a wistaria vine. Blood is the best of fertilizers. Blood is the best of fertilizers, and the old gardener would not let her waste a drop of it. Right. So when you say that, means the word called as a contemptuously, it indicates disrespectfully. When you talk about that, the word called as a wistaria vine. So what is that wistaria vine? It is a flowering plant used for decoration. That is what called as a wistaria vine. So what does it they actually say? Means if you look into the this particular paragraph where it is stated, the cook who said disrespectfully that their master was just so proud of his skill, and he believes that he could save anyone's life. He did not bother whose life was means important and whose life was not. So means and whose life he was saving also. She cut the neck of a hen. She cut the neck of a hen skillfully. That's what it is pointed. That what she split off means a fowl's neck skillfully. It indicates that she cut the neck of a hen skillfully. And what did she do? Split a fowl's neck skillfully and held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into the root of a wistaria vine. So means and held the bird as it shivered, right? She allowed the blood of that chicken, right? So for the plants, and he did not allow her to waste a single drop of it. So it is the children of whom we must think. Yumi said, sadly. Who said sadly? Yumi said sadly that it is the children of whom we must think. What will be their fate if their father is condemned? Right? Condemned means called as a accused as a traitor. Traitor means who betray his country. Right? So they did not try to hide what they said from the ears of Hannah as she stood arranging the day's flowers in the veranda nearby. And she knew they spoke on purpose. that she might hear. That they were right, she knew too in most of her being, but there was another part of her which she herself could not understand. It was not sentimental liking of the prisoner. She had come to think of him as a prisoner. She had come to think of him as a prisoner. She had not liked him even yesterday when he had said in his impulsive way, "Anyway, let me tell you that my name is Tom." Right? She had only bowed her little distant bow. She saw, she saw hurt in his eyes, but she did not wish to assuage it. Assuage it means called as a decrease or reduce it. Indeed, he was a great trouble in this house. Who means the American. So what happened here? They did not try to hide what they said from the years of Hannah, right? As she stood arranging, as Hannah stood in the veranda, so arranging the flowers, right? The servants discussed the matter in her in Hannah's presence, as they wanted that Hannah to know their views about the matter. The matter, what is the matter? The matter was keeping that American at the house. Hannah also felt that the servants were right, because obviously whatever they were saying was correct. So, but she had some feelings for the injured man, which she could also not analyze or discuss that. She did not like the prisoner, neither means she attached towards the American. The day before, the injured man told her that his name was Tom. Hannah did not like him at that moment also. She had reacted by, bowing her head mildly, right? So she saw that means reaction, her reaction hurt the injured man. Means it seemed like the kind of appearance she showed to the injured man, and that injured man was also emotionally hurt. But she did not want to reduce this hurt, right? That she had caused to him, because the injured man was a great trouble for, you can say that, for her family. So his presence was a threat to Hannah and Sadao, both means the couple. As for Sadao, every day he examined the wound carefully. The last stitches had been pulled out this morning. So every day he takes care of the man. So and examined the wound, whether the wound was cured or not. The last stitches he had been pulled out this morning, and the young man would, means in a fortnight, be nearly as well as ever. So Sadao went back to his office and carefully typed a letter to the chief of police, reporting the whole matter. On the 21st day of February, an escaped prisoner was washed up on the shore in front of my house. So far, he typed, and then he opened a secret drawer of his desk and put the unfinished report into it. He opened a secret drawer of his desk and put the unfinished report into it. Unfinished means what? Which was not completed, right? So, on the seventh day after that, right, two things happened. In the morning, the servants slept together, right? Their belongings tied in large square cotton kerchief, right? Cotton kerchief means that called as a square piece of cloth, right? When Hannah got up in the morning, nothing was done. Means the house was unsettled. The house was not cleaned and the food was not prepared, right? And means Hannah knew that it means what? The servants means wanted to leave the place and they left. So she was dismayed. Dismayed means called as a shocked and sad and even terrified also. But her pride as a mistress. But at the same time, she was the housewife. She was the wife of Sadao. She was the better half, right? So means her pride as a better half would not allow her to show it also, right? So she did not want to know these things to Sadao. Instead, she inclined her head gracefully. Means gracefully is called as something like nothing happened at home when they appeared before her in the kitchen. And she paid them off and thanked them for all that they had done for her. They were crying. So who were crying? The servants were crying. But she did not cry. The cook and the gardener had served Sadao since he was a little boy. The cook and the gardener means had served Sadao since he was a little boy in his father's house. And Yumi cried because of the children. So she was so grieving, painful, that after she had gone, she ran back to Hannah. So, like a movie, means where you love somebody very much, and when means that person is going far from you. So, and after reaching to a particular place, come back and hold you, hug you, right? That's what you would find out. So, that is what the kind of interesting thing happened, right? It means they all prepared. They means put everything in a square piece of cloth. So, and when they left, so means Hannah understood that whatever they said, they means meant it, and they were doing it, and that's why she paid everyone's means you can say that wages, and make them buy, say buy, right? So it seemed like the kind of a means hard emotion she kept on her chest. So on the seventh day, after that, two things happened. Yeah, that's what I pointed. Now, she made the breakfast, right? She pointed, Hannah, after she had left. Yep. So if the baby misses me too much tonight, send for me. I'm going to my own house, and you know where it is. Thank you, Hannah said, smiling. But she told herself she would not send for Yumi, however the baby cried. Means obviously, why did Yumi leave the place? Now, because of a kind of a fear, right? And but before leaving, she made a kind of a message to whom? Hannah, that what if the baby misses me too much or cried, then means she is at her, she was at her home, and when she possible, then Hannah could send send for calling back. Uh, so she made the breakfast, and Sadao helped with the children. Neither of them spoke of the servants beyond the fact they were gone. But after Hannah had taken morning food to the prisoner, she came back to Sadao. Right? It means what? Now they both knew what happened that day, but they were so cooperative. One was attending the children, one was preparing breakfast. So why is it we cannot see clearly what we ought to do? So Hannah came back and said, Sadao. She asked him, even the servants see more clearly than we do. Why are we different from other Japanese? Now, obviously, means wife forcefully said those of the things to means her husband. Sadao did not answer that. But a little later, when sometime after, he went into the room where the prisoner was and said briskly is called as a quickly. Today you may get up on your feet. I want you to stay up only 5 minutes at a time. Tomorrow you may try it to 2 times as long. It would be well that you get back your strength as quickly as possible. Now, that's what means Sadao wanted, means whom? Means the American to do that, right? So he went into the means a prisoner of war, was resting and spoke very fast, right? He said that means what he could do actually. He could stand up and stand up on his feet. Sada wanted him to stand only for 5 minutes, and then after tell him to you do it 2 times as long the day before, and it would be well you get back your strength as quickly as possible. He saw the flicker. He saw the flicker of terror in the young face that was still very pale. Pale is called as odd, right? Strange, surprising. So He saw the kind of a imbalance, or called as a changing of appearance on the young man's face. It was nothing but a vilified, violent, or called as a kind of a fear on his face. The boy said, okay. The boy murmured, like a, tutoring to a boy, and you gave him some kind of a task and told him, do this task. And how did he reply? So the same way the boy murmured. Evidently, he was determined to say more. I feel I ought to thank you, doctor, for having saved my life. Right. So it seemed, or it appeared, that he wanted to say more, and he wanted to thank, means whom? He wanted to thank the person or the doctor. Sada, don't thank me too early, Sadao said coldly. Right, because he saved the life of the American, but it was also, means, a matter of risk for his family. So that's why he pointed, don't thank me too early. Maybe it happened like in the next day I would hand over you to the police. So that's what the thought come. So Sadav said coldly, don't thank me too early. He saw the flicker of terror again in the boy's eyes, because once he said that don't thank me, so the terror came back to the boy's eyes. Terror as unmistakable as an animal's. Right. Scare is called as the spot mark uh, on his neck, where crimson means, that's called as a bright red color for a moment. Those scars, what were they? Sadav did not ask. So he did not ask the boy about them, but he observed those of the scars. In the afternoon, the second thing happened. Hannah, working hard on unaccustomed labor. Unaccustomed labor means what? Now, something that you are not usually do, the kind of a hard work, but you are doing it because all these servants left. Saw a messenger come to the door in official uniform. So it was in the afternoon. The second thing happened. What was that? Hannah was working, means unusual activities, or something that she doesn't do every day. So, but she saw a messenger come to the door in official uniform. Her hands went weak, and she could not draw her breath. It means she felt like it was the, means, police officer, and they came to know that there was an American there was the American, means, who lived in this house. So that's why. So the servants must have told already. Right. It means she felt like the servants told all such things. She ran to Sadav, gasping like this, means not able to take breath, unable to even produce a word. But by then the messenger had simply followed her through the garden, and there he stood. Right. She pointed at him helplessly. Right. She pointed her finger towards the messenger. Sadav looked up from his book. Looked up from his book. He was in his office. Right. The other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. So southern sunshine is called as the door of the office, which opened into the garden, faced the south direction. And this means that the sunshine which entered the office was not direct and bright. Instead, it was a steady sunshine. So Sada looked up from his book. Looked up means what? Was reading a book. And when he saw Hannah, he looked up. He was sitting in his office, which had a partition, because it is stated, no? He was in his office. Who was in his office? Sada was in his office. The other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. So he was sitting in his office, which that office had a partition. Partition means separation. The part of the office beyond, beyond the partition opened into the garden and was full of shady sunshine. Shady sunshine means called as the rays of the sun is spread everywhere, but that part is called as some kind of a shade. Uh, that's also known as a chow. What is it? He asked the messenger. What is it? He asked the messenger, and then he rose and he stood up. He stood up. Seeing the man's uniform, Sadao asked the messenger the matter due to which he had visited them. So when he saw that the messenger was wearing a uniform, he stood up as a mark of respect. Who? Sadao. You are to come to the palace. You are to come to the palace, the man said. The old general is in pain again. The messenger said that Sadao was supposed to accompany him to the place or palace. Means Sadao means supposed to come with that messenger to the palace. So he added that the old general was suffering in pain and Sadao was supposed to visit him and treat him as a doctor. So Hannah breathed, means felt relaxed. Is that all? Oh, is that all? So Hannah breathed and said, is that all? All, the messenger, surprised, exclaimed. Is it not enough? Indeed it is, she replied. I'm very sorry. Upon hearing the Hannah was relieved and she said, oh, with this, she took a deep breath and asked, that was that all for which the messenger had come? The messenger reacted and said all. He could not understand that what else could it be for which he was supposed to visit the house. He asked, that was not enough? Did they want any other reason for him to visit them? Hannah was sorry for her reaction and said that the reason was enough for the messenger to visit them. She did not need any reason for him to visit them. When Sadao came to say goodbye, when Sadao came to say goodbye, whom? The man. She was in the kitchen, means Hannah was in the kitchen, but doing nothing. The children were asleep, and she sat merely resting for a moment, more exhausted, more tired from her fright or from her fear than from her walk. So I thought they had come to arrest you, means Hannah said to Sadao. So means he gazed down into her anxious eyes. Gazed down into her anxious eyes means with the kind of a surprising thought or means anxiety. Gaze down means look down, right? So, or called as a looked carefully at Hannah's anxious eyes. I must get rid of this man for your sake, he said in distress. Somehow I must get rid of him. So he was very sad. He was very sad and distressed. Distressed means called as a uh, uh, dejected or hopeless. And he said that he must means come out from the kind of a situation. So he added also he had to means uh, make this man to leave their house by any means. So thou goes to see the general. So means of course the general said weakly. Right. Of course, the general said weakly, I understand fully, but that is because I once took a degree in Princeton. So few Japanese have. Right. So if you talk about this, of course, the general said weakly, I understand fully, but this that is because I once took a degree, right, in Princeton. So I care nothing for the man, Excellency, Sadao said, but having operated on him with such success. Yes, yes, the general said, it only makes me feel you more indispensable to me. You more indispensable to me means you more necessary to me. So means the general is saying to Sadao, evidently you can save anyone. You are so skilled. You say you think I can stand one more such attack as I have had today. Not more than one, Sadao said. Now you feel like what? Means now Sadao with that general, with that messenger went to the general's house. So where he met the means whom? He met the means general. So Sadao narrated the entire story to the general. The general, who was very weak, said that he understood Sadao's position because he had also studied in America at the Princeton University, but there were only a few Japanese means who had studied in America. Sadao replied to the general that he did not care for the American man, but as he had operated upon him successfully, the general interrupted him and said, "Yes, yes." He felt that Sadao was a necessary part of means his life. Why? Now, because as Sadao had been successful at operating on the man, the general felt that Sadao was very skillful. The general asked that did Sadao, you can say that what, um, did Sadao think that the general had any chance of surviving another heart attack? Right. So as the one he had that day, Sadao replied that in his opinion, the general could not survive more than one such heart attack. Then certainly or surely I can allow nothing to happen to you. The general said with anxiety. Then certainly I can allow nothing to happen to you. The general said with anxiety. His long, odd Japanese face became expressionless, which meant that he was in deep thought. You cannot be arrested. You cannot be arrested, the general said, closing his eyes. Suppose you were condemned to death and the next day I had to have my operation. The general said that then in that case, he could not allow anything to happen to Saddam. Because the interesting part was what? Means when Dr. Sadao said that, means uh, that the general would get a means another heart attack, and in that heart attack means there is no chance of his surviving. Now the general said that then in that case he possibly not allow anything to happen to Sadao, because if another heart attack happened, then Dr. Sadao would not be present to save him, right? So therefore, means he did not want anything happen to Dr. Sadao. He wanted to say that he needed Sadao and so he would protect him. The general's long, weak, yellowish face become expressionless because he was thinking about Sadao being arrested. He became serious, closed his eyes at the thought of Sadao being arrested and said that Sadao could not be arrested. Further, he added that if Sadao was sentenced to death and he needed an operation the next day, then who would operate upon him? Because he believed that Sadao was the best and skillful doctor. So the general wanted to say that he needed Sadao and so he would protect him and he would not let anything happen to Sadao. So there are other surgeons, Excellency, Sadao suggested. That why me? There are other surgeons also, Excellency. So the general replied, none I trust. The best ones have been trained by Germans and would consider the operation successful even if I died. Right. So I do not care for their point of view. He mentioned, it seems a pity that we cannot better combine the German ruthlessness with the American sentimentality. Then you could turn your prisoner over to execution. You could turn your prisoner over to execution, but and yet I could be sure you would not murder me while I was unconscious. The general laughed. He had an unusual sense of humor, right? As a Japanese, could you not combine these two foreign elements? He asked. So here you would find out Sadao mentioned to the general that there were many other surgeons in Japan. Why he? Right? So the general replied that he did not believe anyone else other than Sadao. So it is also true. So he added that the best surgeons had been trained, right? Best surgeons had been trained by the Germans. And for them, the operation would be successful if the general died, right? So if the general died, then the operation was successful. He did not care for their point of view, right? So the general added that the Japanese could not combine the rough nature of the Germans. Means Japanese could not mix with the nature of Germans, right? With the emotional nature of the Americans. So Japanese could mix with the Americans, but Japanese could not mix with the Germans. So the general wanted to say that they did not have such persons who could combine the harsh nature of a German and the emotional nature of the American, right? He said that if they would have been able to do that, then Sadao could be harsh and could turn the prisoner to the Japanese, and at the same time, means be emotional and not murder the general during the operation, right? So, with this, the general laughed. The writer says that the what? The general had a strange sense of humor. He was very clever. Then he asked Sadao that being Japanese, could he not combine these two foreign elements? Combine these foreign elements. So the foreign elements to which the general is referring is what? Now it is nothing but the harsh nature of a German and the emotional nature of an American, right? So Sadao smiled. I'm not quite sure, he said. Sadao smiled. I am not quite sure, he said, but for your sake, I would be willing to try, Excellency. So, because the kind of a question Sadao was, the general asked Sadao, right? So, and said that he was not quite sure about it, but for its betterment, he was willing to try it out, means combine German for the harsh nature and American for the emotional. The general shook his head and said, I had rather not be the test case, he said. The general shook his head and said that I had rather not be the test case, means you will not test on me. So he felt suddenly weak and overwhelmed. Overwhelmed means excited with the cares of his life as an official in times such as these when repeated victory brought great responsibility all over the South Pacific. It's too long, no?
Yes.
So, and I don't want to actually means read like a quick manner. So I want it to be understood, you to be understood. So that's the reason I'm just going like a okay, no issue. Um, I mean, hmm, yep. So where we were, the general shook his head. I had rather not be the test case, he said. So he felt suddenly weak and overwhelmed with the cares of his life as an official in times, such as these when repeated victory brought great responsibility all over the South Pacific. So if you talk about that, the general felt weak and also emotional as he was reminded of the problems he had faced throughout his life while fulfilling his duties and responsibilities in various wars owned by Japan, right? So that is what you would find out means uh, the general felt. It is very unfortunate that this man should have washed up on your doorstep, he said irritably, right? So, in a kind of, I feel it so myself, Sadao said gently. I feel it so myself. So it means called as Sadao also agreed with the general. So it would be best if he could be quietly killed, the general said to whom? Sadao. Not by you, but by someone who doesn't know him. I have my own private assassins. Assassins means professional killers. Suppose I send two of them to your house tonight, or better, any night. You need know nothing about it. It is now warm. What would be more natural than that? You should leave the outer partition of the white man's room open to the garden while he sleeps. Now that's what is the plan the general was giving to whom? Sadao to do. So certainly it would be very natural. Sadao agreed. Sadao said, okay, means surely it would be very natural. In fact, it is so left open every night. So good, the general said, yawning means like open the mouth and feeling like lazy. They're very capable assassins. They make no noise and they know the trick of inward bleeding. If you like, I can even have them remove the body. I can even have them remove the body. Means the body will also not be present at your home. So Sadao considered that perhaps would be best. Excellency. He agreed, thinking of Hannah. So he left the general's presence then and went home, thinking over the plan. In this way, the whole thing would be taken out of his hands. He would tell Hannah nothing, since she would be timid. She would be in a fear at the Hannah would be in a fear at the idea of assassins in the house. And yet certainly such persons were essential in an absolute state such as Japan was. How else could rulers deal with those who opposed them? So, a state run by kings must have total powers, right? So, he refused to allow anything but reason to be the atmosphere of his mind as he went into the room where the American was in bed. But as he opened the door, to his surprise, he found the young man out of bed and preparing to go into the garden. So, like Sadao was telling him, no, Sadao did not means, think any thought enter his mind. As he went into the room where the American man was sleeping, he surprised to see him that he was out of his bed and he was getting ready to go into the garden. So when Sadao asked him with the exclamation, "What is this? Who gave you permission to leave this, leave your room?" Right. So I'm not used to waiting for permission. Tom said, "Galley." Galley means called as in a means a smiling manner. See, he said, "I'm not used to waiting for anyone's permission. Gosh, I feel pretty good again, but will the muscles on this side always feel stiff?" So he said that he was feeling good, right? But at the same time, he was also telling about some kind of a problem, muscles on his some sides that he pointed that whether it would be feel stiff all the time or not, stiff and rigid. So Sadao inquired, surprised that is it so? He forgot all else, the kind of a discussion with the general. Now I thought I had provided means against that. He forgot all else. Now I thought I had provided against all that. He murmured. He lifted the edge of the man's shirt. He removed the edge of the man's shirt and looked at the healing scare, the scare which was means about to cure. Massage may do it. Massage means called as a kind of a means therapy. He said, if exercise does not, then massage could means remove that scare. It won't bother me much. The young man said that I don't care about it. His young face was gaunt. Gaunt means called as a very sad, weak. Under the, stubbly blonde beard. Stubbly means unshaven, blonde is called as a light colored, like Americans beard and hair. You would find out blonde in color, yellowish color. So uh, he said that I don't care about it. So say, doctor, I have got something I want to say to you. If I had not met a Jap like you, met a Jap means met a Japanese like you, well, I would not be alive today. But I know that. Means I would not be alive today. I know that. Sadao bowed, but he could not speak. Right. Because Sadao knew that what he did actually some time ago. Sure, I know that. Tom went on warmly. Right. So his big thin hands holding a chair, right, were white at the knuckles. I guess if all the Japs were like you, there would not have been at war, would not have been a war. So that's what a kind of a means a conversation between them. So perhaps Sadao said with difficulty, maybe at the end. And now I think you had better go back to bed, Sadao requested the person. He helped the boy back into bed and then bowed. Bowed means put his head down and said good night. So thou slept badly that night because he found out the kind of a discussion between he with the man changed his mind time and time, and means again and again he woke thinking he heard the rustling of footsteps. So he, because he told the general that he could send assassins, right? So professional killers who would come that night and to kill means whom? The man, the American. So means that's what he was thinking all the time at that night. The rustling of footsteps, the sound of the footsteps, or the sound made by the footsteps of the soldiers or assassins, the sound of a twig broken or a stone displaced in the garden, right? So a twig means called as a branch of a tree that was broken, a stone displaced in the garden, a noise such as men might make who carried a burden, like who carried a burden means who would means kill the man. So the next morning he made the excuse to go first into the guest room, right? If the American were gone, he then could simply tell Hannah that so the general had directed. So means if the means American would not be present there, then what means he would tell the Hannah all this discussion he made with the general, and that was the impact of American men to die. But when he opened the door, he saw at once that there on the pillow was the shaggy blonde head. Shaggy means hairy, blunt head hairy. So he could hear the peaceful breathing of sleep, and he closed the door again quietly. So he found that the man was sleeping, right? He could hear the sound and of his breathing. Sadao closed the door of the room. He is asleep, means Hannah told him, right? He's almost well to sleep like that. So it seemed like he was getting cured. What shall we do with him? Hannah slowly said. Means what Hannah whispered her old refrain, means old means voice. Sadao shook his head. I must decide in a day or two, he promised. So means Sadao promised that he would decide in a day or a two. So, but surely he thought the second night must be the night. So he thought that what the second night, who would come? Means the assassins or professional killer would come, because that night, if they had not come, so the second night they must be coming. There rose a wind that night. There rose a wind that night, and he listened to the sounds of bending boughs, bending branches, and whistling partition. Right. So thou thought that perhaps the killers would come the next night, and the night was windy. Right. He heard the sounds made by the branches as they bent due to the wind, wind, and the partitions made whistling sound. Partitions means that called as the room which was separated. So that made whistling sounds as the wind passed through them. So immediately Sadao said, Hannah, walk too. Sorry, means Hannah also woke too at the same time. Ought we not to go and close the sick man's partition? So Hannah asked Sadao that, shall we go to close the partition door of the man's room? So Sadao said, no, he is able now to do it for himself. He is able, means the man was means fine now and he could do it for himself. Right. But the next morning the American was still there. Right. Then the third night, of course, must be the night. So the wind changed to quite rain, and the garden was full of the sound of dripping eaves and running springs. That's something called as a Sadao watch. Hopefully that they might come on the third night instead of the wind. There was rain that night. The garden was full of noises, right? Dripping eaves and running springs. It's that's what it is called as a winding. Instead of wind, what happened? Rain held at that night. The garden was full of noises, full of the sound, full of noises as the water dripped down the roof, and also tiny rivals, you can say that flowed through the garden. Sadao slept a little better, but he woke at the sound of a crash, slept a little and jumped as he heard a loud noise and leaped to his feet. What was that? Hannah said also. The baby woke at her voice and began to wail. Wail means cry, right? I must go and see. But he held her. So who? Sadao means to hold the hand of Hannah and did not allow her to move. Sadao, she cried, what is the matter with you? She cried, Sadao, what is the matter with you? Don't go, he muttered, don't go. So who? Means Sadao said to Hannah. His terror infected her. Means who? Sadao's fear means influenced means Hannah, and she stood breathless, means unable to breathe or like a kind of a fear, waiting, wanted to know. There was only silence. Together they crept back into the bed. Means slowly they went to the bed. The baby was between the couple. I think we will keep till this and we will continue in the next class. I think